Friday, May 28th, Fireside Chats Without the Fires. This is a podcast about CX, customer experience, as many of our audience hopefully remember. But I'm about to do something that's going to make you change your mind, possibly. Some people may even say it's blasphemous. We learned the word blasphemous from a previous guest. Great word. This may change from a CX podcast to a memories podcast. And we're going to explain that once we get into our session with our guest, Gustavo Imhof, contributing author to the Customer Experience 3 book. The title of today's session, Experiences Don't Matter, comma, Memories Do. And if you're listening and you work in the CX field, you're saying, what? And I hope you're paying attention, because if you're not, you should be shocked by this. No one said anything about experiences. In fact, the opposite. Experiences don't matter. Memories do. Gustavo Imhof, we're going to give you a chance to plead your case here. Welcome to Fireside Chats Without the Fires. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you very much, guys. Love the intro. Thank you very much for having me and for allowing me to kind of spread the blasphemous message, the heresy for the customer experience field. It's I'm sure it's going to be a blast.
Good. We're looking forward to having you, obviously, here. I know what Paul's thinking right here. He's thinking, Neil, you're freaking crazy. But he's also saying he's feeling something else. Paul, what are you feeling? It's Friday.
It's Friday. Friday, Fireside Chats Friday. Neil, I am buzzing. I am buzzing.
Love it. Love it. Love when Paul's buzzing. I got to admit, I'm buzzing, but I'm curious, and I got to get right to it. What the heck are we talking about here? We are all customer experience professionals, or I think we call ourselves that. Are you telling us we're not customer experience specialists, thought leaders, practitioners? We're not in customer experience. We should be in a different business?
Absolutely not. I think that we're definitely on the right business. I'm not trying to uproot and completely transform the industry. It's just making a very simple nuance, I think is the word. I'm thinking we're all so focused on building great interactions, right? Our ethos is really how do we make life as seamless as possible, as great as we can for our customers. And we have a lot of the time a laser focus on the operational delivery of the experience. But the problem is not a single human being makes a decision on the back of an experience. That's simply not how the brain works. We never make a decision on the back of an experience. We make our decisions on the back of what we remember of those experiences. And while it's a nuance, it's a really, really important one. It's a critical one because if I turn it on its head, the only reason this wouldn't be an important nuance is if we remember crystal clear everything that happens, right? If I remember crystal clear everything that happened yesterday when I went to fetch some takeaway to KFC, which was brilliant. Big
KFC?
Fan. Oh, I
You're
love
admitting on this podcast you go to KFC in the United Kingdom?
That's my guilty pleasure, man. That's my guilty pleasure.
The queen is rolling over in her bed right now. Kentucky Fried Chicken in the United Kingdom? Oh my goodness.
Well, that's how it is when you brought abroad, right? You grew up abroad and then you come to the UK and you may have a few quirks that you just carry with you. But essentially, if I go back about that ride, I went into my car, I was through the drive-thru, and the reality is, I don't remember every aspect of it. Right? I don't even remember how I ordered the food and if the person understood me, if they swore at me or whatever. But I remember I ate the KFC. I don't remember exactly how I felt, but I know it was good and I definitely go back. That's the only thing, right? I have a positive memory of it and therefore I'm going to go back. But do I know for a fact exactly what happened? I don't. So the actual experience itself isn't going to impact whether I go back or not. What I remember of it does.
So there are 2 great quotes that you have in your chapter. I want to share them with the audience. By the way, this is not just me sharing. I'm not giving you the Cliff Notes version of this. You need to go buy the book and you need to read the chapter yourselves. But I'm going to share with you just some bits and pieces that I thought were really valuable here. First quote. We make decisions and behave based on what we remember of said experiences. Next quote, a little bit further along. Experiences don't drive decision making. Memories do. Wow. These are powerful statements, especially the second one. Experiences don't drive decision making. Memories do. So what in essence you're telling us is vastly different than what many of us in the CX field are really doing. We believe it's all about experiences. No one's mentioning memories.
And that's the thing, right? Is it comes back to the thing is, if they are one and the same, that's fine. It's just a nuance, and I'm being pedantic. And to be fair, wouldn't surprise me because I've been known to be pedantic in the past. But the reality is, I was looking into it and trying to kind of, taking the scientific approach, try to prove myself wrong, right? I was thinking, okay, so what are like really high impact scenarios where we rely on people's memories for real impactful stuff? And I thought, okay, so let's think of the legal system. And if you think of all those movies or TV shows about a situation in the courts, and you have that smoking gun, pun intended, that is the eyewitness, but the eyewitness that kind of decides the fate of that person, of the person that is accused of a crime, and just that testimony that is hailed almost as the holy grail in the interaction. Now, if those people are able to accurately and consistently remember facts in the right way, and the right people are put behind bars, then I'm just making a nuance that has no place in being, and I just wasted essentially a lot of printing and a lot of time for everyone who read it. But here's the thing: the more I looked into it, the more I realized that eyewitness testimony is incredibly unreliable. Incredibly unreliable. And there are so many lives that have been ruined because of the wrong eyewitness, or the eyewitness remembering something that never happened. And that's the shocking thing, right? Is people are essentially, obviously it's not consciously, but people are impacting people's lives in the negative way because of fabricated memories. And if those high impact decisions disconnect memory and experiences, then we need to acknowledge the fact that our memories aren't faithful faithful recollection of what happened. Therefore, we have to admit the fact that what happens doesn't matter as much as how we remember what happens.
So let's talk about the two things in your chapter that you recommend that we is memorable. There's two of them.
Okay. So the two things essentially that defines what impacts our decision making and what is memorable is the peak end rule that was found out by Daniel Kahneman and colleagues. And that story is fascinating because everyone talks about the peak end rule. And essentially, the idea is that two key elements that are going to drive our decision making and how we remember things, that are going to be the more salient points of the experience, is the emotional high or low. So what was the peak, whether negative or positive, of the experience? And what was the very end element? So how did the experience conclude itself? Those are the two things. Now, what people tend not to look at is kind of what is the study that brought that up? And I think that's fascinating, because the way they got to that summary is that they asked participants in an academic research to put their hands in extremely cold water. Right? So they had to put their hands in cold water for, let's say, 60 seconds. And then they asked the same participants to do a second test. And they put their hands in cold water for 60 seconds, and then an additional 10, 15 seconds. But that additional time, the water was warmer. So the thermic shock was a lot smoother. It was a lot less. But still, it's 60 seconds of the original pain plus 15 seconds of a slightly lower pain. when they ask participants which experience they'd like to do again, because I said, look, you have to do it a third one, but you decide option A or option B. The majority of people decided on the second option. So people consciously decided to go through a more painful experience by suffering for longer, because the last bit was less pain, was a relief. So they objectively decided to go through more pain in a very just unconventional way. Not unconventional, but it's very illogical if you think about it, right? If you look at the numbers, it doesn't make sense. Why would you subject yourself to more pain? Because objectively, they are going to suffer more pain. Objectively, they did. But what they remember of it is drastically different. What they remember is that it was a lot more bearable at the end of the second one.
So
and that's what the decision.
This is the emotional component of the two things that we talk about. We're talking to emotion here.
Yeah.
Got it. And the second recommendation for us to be able to focus on making things more memorable.
It's just, actually, do you deliver on it, right? Is everyone, I see so much at conferences and write white papers and so on, everyone focusing on building the state-of-the-art, the exceptional, the sexy, and we forget about delivering the basics, right? There's no point having a pretty website if you cannot complete the order, right? It's brilliant that you have a superb recommendation engine and you have great features and you talk really well with great story around your products. If I cannot check out, what's the point? I'm going to remember I couldn't check out. I'm going to remember how cheated I felt, and I'm never coming back.
Yeah. In your words, at the conclusion of the journey, did the customer do what they intended to do? And how did they feel at that point? And I love this, especially the first part, which is, did the customer do what they intended to do? In my humble opinion, the most important activity we hope to achieve in a customer interaction is resolution. I care less about empathy. I care less about delight or wow or extremes on one side or the other. I want us to be able to resolve, which I think what you're saying. If the customer came to our website to transact, were they able to transact? If the customer came to the website or to contact the contact center to ask a question or express a problem, open a ticket, were they able to do that? And hopefully were they able to get it resolved? And then we can talk about things like less effort and all that stuff, but did they get to achieve the first objective, which I think we're saying both the same thing here. I use the word resolution, you just say intent. And I think it's ultimately the same concept.
Well, that's it, right? I always use the broadband example, right? Is if I'm calling the contact center because my internet is down, and the agent is incredibly empathetic, they resonate with me, we have a great chat, but my broadband is still down, what's the point? On the other hand, if they're an absolute jerk to me, but my broadband comes back, that's fine. I mean, I have my internet.
Right? Yeah, it matters less.
And that's the thing, ultimately it's the outcome. The outcome that matters the most. Obviously, it's cherry on top of the cake if I also actually have a great conversation and I have a laugh and so on. But ultimately, customers don't engage to make friends, right? It's no one say, oh, my best friend, he's my account manager at the bank. Said no one ever.
Said no one ever. Well done. Said no one ever.
Love that.
Ultimately, what we want is I'm engaging with a company because I want some value, some product, some services out of it. I expect that to happen. Everything on top of that is a bonus. It may make me an advocate. It may make me come back or whatever. But ultimately, unless you deliver me what I'm paying you to deliver, everything else is irrelevant.
Yeah. Let's move on. There's another section in your chapter which I really enjoy. You discuss memorable variables. That's capital M, capital V. Memorable variables. And you say there are 15 of them. We don't need to go through the entire list of 15, but maybe one or two. What are the most important of the memorable variables?
So on those ones, I'm going to plug the book that kind of sparked it all. And it's a book called Impossible to Ignore by Carmen Simon, PhD. And that's essentially where I stole all those variables from. I'm not going even to pretend. I just found the idea so refreshing about a couple of years ago, and it just stuck with me. But essentially, it's 15 ways that we can help our message be remembered. And what I love about it is that there's some points that are in complete contradiction, right? So, for example, you have contrast and familiarity, right?
Sure.
So the point that is familiar is something that we resonate with, right? Is we empathize, and that's why people love to talk to people that come from the same hometown, because you have that familiarity, you have that connection. But we also love contrast. We love to be able to talk to someone that we've never met before. We have nothing in common, and yet somehow we click. And it's really thinking that there's several levers that you can harness, and the combination of those allows you to stand out. And that's kind of the whole point of my chapter is let's design journeys that get the job done. So let's make sure I have my broadband back. Let's make sure that you do what you want to achieve. But let's go one step further and design to be memorable. And let's use some of those levers to stand out. And that's why like innovation is so compelling, right? Innovation is about novelty. It's about surprise. It's about bringing something that we never thought would ever exist. That's why the iPhone was such a massive success. People were thinking, what do you mean? A computer in your pocket? You must be mad. That doesn't exist. Doesn't make sense. It's a complete departure. It's a complete contrast from how I understand my world. And that's why it was so powerful, was so memorable.
I recommend to the audience to look at these 15 words of this list. They are not, in my opinion, necessarily easy to understand. They will provoke thought here, which is, I think, the intent. It's a really good list. It's quite interesting. And you will see that there are some examples of not necessarily contradiction, but maybe opposites. But for the reason that you explained, there's a reason they're on there. I like this list very much. Let's go to, and I love this part because I think our audience, and audiences in general, like to know the top 5 or what's the recipe? How do I do this? What should I do and take away to bring back to my work, share with my boss, share with my teammates? What are the things that I can do myself to be successful? And you offer 6 quick wins. And quick wins, those are your words, quick wins. Can you share what those quick wins are?
Yeah, so I think one of them is that element of surprise, right? Is the unexpected. Is I spent for my sins, I spent some time working in sales, and one expression I fell in love in that time was pattern interrupt. Right? Is you're essentially engaging with the world in autopilot. If something kind of surprises you, throws you off your loop, you're made to pay attention, right? Because you're going through life in autopilot and you're made to pay attention. And that is something to be a salient point. That's something that you're going to stop, think, oh, wait a second, what's happening there? And that's essentially, if you think, that's exactly how I built my chapter, right? I mean, the title of the chapter in the customer experience book saying experiences don't matter. I mean, that's a shock factor. That's that novelty. That's the surprise element. And the surprise throws you off your tracks, but you also have that emotional bit. It can be delight, it can be feeling threatened, but you have an emotional, visceral reaction to things not going as you expected, of having your expectation disconfirmed. And it's a good one. The only problem is that it's not sustainable, right? Because you cannot surprise people 15 times. Once you've seen that massive cliffhanger in that movie, you've seen the cliffhanger is not going to surprise you. But it's a really powerful one to use with parsimony and really delight people in that way.
So surprise, and I'm going to read the short sentence you have here in your chapter next to surprise. Think of proactive or heroic service recovery, solving an issue for a customer before they even notice they have a problem. Emotion is often involved here. So for example, going back to broadband, if the broadband goes down, there's nothing worse than realizing in the middle of a podcast session that you're recording live with video and audio that the broadband goes down. But if there were a way for the broadband company to send you a notification, a push message, an email, a phone call, even a voice broadcast message, we're so sorry the broadband is down. We're going to automatically reset your router. You should be back up in 35 seconds or less, right? I think that's what we're talking about here.
Oh, that's the thing. That's setting the bar pretty high, Neil, because if I think about it, and imagine getting a text from your broadband provider saying, look, unfortunately, the network was down for a couple of hours on Tuesday last week. We're really sorry for the inconvenience. Just to let you know, we realized we understood what the problem is, and here's some store credits next to your next bill to compensate for that. Right? I don't even need to call them to complain, because that's one of my pet hates with broadband, right? Is you call them, say, look, my broadband wasn't working yesterday, and they cannot see anything because they can only see at that point in time, well, but sorry, it's working now. Like, yes, it's working now. That's how I found your number. But it wasn't yesterday, and I lost 3 meetings or job interview or whatever. It's having that proactivity really is great because it stands out, because no one does it. Now, if one of the big players started doing it, they would really stand out. They would surprise people, and they will set the bar much higher for everyone else.
Yeah, agreed. I'm going to share for the audience the other 5 items of your 6 quick wins. Repetition, novelty, surprise, which we just went over, social aspects, motivation, and facts. And I think we could probably almost dedicate an entire podcast episode to each of these because there's so much behind them. But this is a great list. I encourage the audience to read through and reflect on these and how to add these as quick wins to your experience, especially for those of us that want to take away or have a recipe or have something concrete to leave the podcast with. I want to ask you a final question. Here you are in a customer experience book, the 3rd edition of this book, Customer Experience 3, with amazing practitioners, authors, thought leaders, lots of years of experience in customer experience. And yet you're telling us this ain't about customer experience. This is about something different. How do you get along with all these practitioners? How is this message being received? Are they looking at you like you're effing crazy? That you're out there on an island, or what? Or how is the message being received? It's quite different.
Yeah, I think that, to be honest, the people that I talk to and aren't ghosting me at the moment probably haven't read the chapter. That's probably why. But all jokes aside, is essentially I'm not discrediting the industry in any way. And my background, for example, is insight, right? I build VOC programs, voice of the customer programs for a living. Market research is essentially my bread and butter. But if you think about it, it's about asking the customer what they remember about their experience. Is it, right? Is what the customer remembers. So surveys are exactly that. Is what did the customer remember? Not what actually happened. We're asking the customer's perspective. And if you look at, for example, how the CXPA defines it, it's about customer perceptions. And so I'm kind of rewarding perception into memories, because we understand how the brain works, or a little bit about how the brain works, we can design for memorability, while we can't really design for perception because of how unique those are. So the only tweak really I bring to the table is, when you're designing a new journey, look at those variables, look at those 15 levers, and ask yourself, how can you intentionally, mindfully bring those in? How can you bake those in a very intentional way to make sure people remember what you want them to remember?
Excellent. Let's wind down to the final third of the podcast. So we like to ask our guests to share with us 3 responses to 3 questions. The first question is, do you have a CX myth that you'd like to bust? Some common held notion that you think is absolutely bunk or bollocks, maybe, as you say over there?
Good effort, that, Neil. Good effort, that. It's a good effort, that, buddy.
Bollocks. Yeah.
So if you think that the title of my chapter was heresy or blasphemy, I think I'm going to cross the line and then some.
Cross it. Here we go. Get ready, audience. Here we go. Line is about to be crossed.
Drum roll,
So
please.
essentially, one of my biggest pet peeves is saying that that companies should be customer centric, right? That we should put the customer first, and I hate it with a passion because we're kind of saying that companies exist for the sole purpose of serving customers. That is not true, right? Companies exist to generate value for shareholders, right? Essentially, a company is resources, more often than not financial, that are thrown at a machine, a black box, to create value, right? It's money that needs to create more money. That's what a company is. And what it does is it does it by serving customers. But ultimately, if you don't have any shareholders, if your company doesn't perform well enough for you to actually invest in a risky company rather than, I don't know, in the treasury bonds, then you don't have a company, you don't have a product to sell to customers. And I think that a lot of people kind of say, oh, put the customer first, delight the customers. And it's brilliant, but let's not forget that we need to be profitable as well. Because it's outstanding if you make your customer very, very happy. It's outstanding if you delight your customer. But if you become unprofitable in the process, then you have a delighted customer for a company that went bankrupt.
I'm going to ask you a question. You only get a one-word answer on this one. And we're going to go off script here. So you believe that businesses should not necessarily be customer-centric. Okay. That's the myth you've just liked to bust. What do you say to all the ones that are beating the drum about employee experience? Should companies be employee-centric? You only get one answer, yes or no. I'll ask the question again. Should companies be employee-centric? One-word answer.
Shareholders.
Perfect. I promise we're going to debate this one on an additional podcast, a next podcast, because this is a whole nother Pandora's box we're going to open up. By the way, I think I'm kind of in agreement with you, but we'll get to that in a different podcast. This is a heavy duty comment. It reminds me, by the way, Jess Noble, if you're listening, Jess Noble's thought process is anything we do should always tie back to business results. Without business results, there's no business. Yep. And I think you're saying the same thing.
Exactly. And that's the thing, right, is I'm kind of just taking a bit the bird's eye view. Like I'm just leaving the company and take bird's eye view and think macroeconomically, no one's going to invest in a company if the company doesn't perform better than the savings account. That's fact, right? It's if your money performs better in a savings account and you decide to start a startup instead, you are bonkers. That's the only definition. It's like taking insanity to a whole new level.
Yeah, I like it. You have 2 CX quotes. This is the second of the final third here. Share 2 CX quotes that you developed that you think will resonate with the audience.
So I think the first one, I don't remember it because I was told to close all my things that could actually make any notifications. But the second one, and I'm sure, Neil, you probably have the first one at hand. The second one, and that's one that really resonates a lot with me because customer experience is about influencing people, right? There's no two ways about it. It's about influencing people. I like to always remind people that no one ever gets out of bed in the morning thinking, today I'm going to do a rubbish job, right? No one gets out of bed saying, you know what? Today is a great day. I'll be horrendous at my job.
I can't help but laugh.
Everyone gets up and think, I'm going to do my best.
Yep.
And we've all been guilty of criticizing colleagues that aren't going fast enough, that aren't doing the right things, or that are well above their heads. Yeah. But we need to remind ourselves, right, is they're doing their best. No one is thinking, oh, you know what, that customer experience team, I'm going to give them a hard time today because that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
And I think that that's from a book from Bazidar that really says no one gets out of bed to do a terrible job, and we need to have that empathy and keep that in mind.
I like it. You have a list of 3 CX heroes, and I have them here if you need it, in case they're not top of mind. I can give you a hint. I can read them for you, or you can make up 3 quickly if you want.
I'll make 3 up. Let's be fun. I think three people that really wow me in terms of the customer experience space. The first one is one of my co-author and someone that has been a guest in this podcast, which is Sandra Thompson, who did an outstanding piece on emotional intelligence. She's one of the first. She's the very first certified emotional intelligence expert by Daniel Goleman, and she created the EI Evolution Summit Plus, like a Summit Plus, which essentially is crazy because it's an event over 5 months and 2 days, and she managed to bring Daniel Goleman himself to the thing, and I think that's just brilliant how she's redesigning the events experience, right? So that's the first one. A second one, it's a gentleman all the way from sunny USA. So I'm trying to make it as international as I can, and it's a Dennis Wakabayashi. And the reason I really admire Dennis is a few weeks ago he came under heavy fire from a few people, myself included. I'll hold my hand up for that, because he put together a customer experience hall of fame and promoting lots of people for fighting the good fight and putting things forward. And a lot of criticism for various reasons. My own reason is some of my personal heroes like Joe Pine, author of The Experience Economy, weren't included in that list. And you know what? He's the first person I've seen in CX take the time to reply to every single criticism, justify his points, admit where he was wrong, justify himself. And I thought that was brilliant, because social media is a place where it's more an echo chamber than anything, right? The amount of time where I see someone challenging someone and it's tumbleweeds or blocked is just outstanding. So having Dennis come in and actually take the time to reply to everyone who was criticizing him was just mind-blowing.
Yeah, you're right. I have seen his CX Hall of Fame, and I disagree with much of it, but you know what? He had the to go ahead and publish it. No one else did. It got people thinking, which I think is part of the thing of putting out good content. He got people to react and to think. Good for him.
And that has sparked a community. So he launched the Customer Experience Factory with Alex Mead. That is a new community that is focused on really changing the status quo and driving CX doers, professionals, to really get together and think, how do we advance the community? And I think that's brilliant, the attitude he has had.
Final CX here. Do you have one more for us?
Yeah, Nick Thompson at Glassbox. And the main reason I'm picking Nick is, again, parting from a pet peeve. People have been talking about the experience delivery gap from Bain. Study from 2005, 80% of executives believe they deliver an outstanding experience to their customers. 8% of customers agree.
Yeah.
Right. 2005. I've seen it in the past month. 3 people talking about that as if the data was from yesterday. And I mean, it's 16-year-old data, and it's just lazy, right? It's just lazy. I made a bit of a rant in there, and Nick, brilliant chap, came in and shared a very much up-to-date survey by Forrester from 2020 that said that, there's still like about 70% of companies that fall short of expectations. But the data is from 2020, and it shows a pattern.
Yeah.
Things have improved slightly. But still, I thought it was brilliant that a rant of mine kind of puts in front of many people's eyes a research I never heard of. And we need more people that contribute